And speaking of fish, Tina will go into how we assess Lake Marion's fishery.
Thanks. All right, so another important topic that we looked into was the fishery. So a few of the activities that we did, we looked into the history of the fishery, just how Lake Marion was once a fish hatchery, and at different periods throughout its history it was stocked with different types of fish. We also attended the family fishing day to see what people were catching, and through community surveys and figured out stuff like that. And we also did a survey of macroinvertebrates, which are aquatic insects. And we did that 3 times throughout the summer at 9 different spots throughout the lake and creek area. We also surveyed aquatic plants, and you can see this map here. There are 350 points that we sampled twice throughout the summer to get an idea of what plants are in the lake. And as David mentioned, we also did some water quality sampling. So the current conditions of Lake Marion, through interactions with the community at the lake and at these meetings, and through surveys, that it's a very important community resource, and that we want to preserve and improve upon this resource. And the next thing we noticed is that, as David said, there are a lot of carp in Lake Marion, and you can see them, actually, this is a picture of Lake Marion, they're spawning right there. And they like to eat the stuff at the bottom of the lake, and so they uproot plants, and then they cause the sediment to get into the water and make it cloudy. And so that affects not only other fish, but it affects the plants as well. And through our aquatic insect survey, we found that this is the most common insect in the lake. It's a damselfly larvae, and it's a predatory insect. And our aquatic plant survey, we found that there's a lot of curly leaf pondweed, which is an invasive plant. And you can see right here, he was helping remove this curly leaf from the lake for the RC boat racing. And so it not only impedes the recreational use of the lake, but it also impedes the habitat. But for natural or native plants, we found that compared to other lakes in the area, Lake Marion is about on par. You can see that there's 7 species of plants in the lake today, and there's about 8 or so in the lakes surrounding it. So it's about the same when it comes down to native plants. And so these are a few recommendations that we've come up with for the fishery. And once again, there's a whole bunch more in our report. But these are just a few key ones that we wanted to let everyone know about. So the first would be carp management. And so the first step would be cut off the source, which is Black Earth Creek, and then draw down water levels, and then remove with nets or chemical treatments. So these processes are described in our report. For example, you can see this is Lake Wingra in Madison, and they've isolated this area and taken all the carp out, and you can see how much more clear this area is compared to the rest of the lake. And that's just how much they dig up that sediment and really just cause it to be that cloudy. So carp management would be a really good way to keep your lake, the water clearer. And another way to improve fish diversity is stocking preferable fish for your fishing. And another recommendation is to diversify the physical habitat, including the depth, the structure, and plants. So dredging to deepen the areas would provide habitat in the winter and cooler areas in the summer months. And resloping the banks would provide shallow areas for spawning and for juvenile fish. Adding woody debris and increasing nearshore shade, and also improving the aquatic plants by managing the curly leaf pondweed would also improve this habitat and just give the fish a lot more places to live and thrive. Alright, so the next section that we looked at was the shoreline habitat. And this habitat is really important. It's a transitional zone between the land and the aquatic habitats. And so a lot of different animals use that area, including both land and aquatic animals. And so we looked into the issues in this area through the terrestrial vegetation, stormwater quality, and goose management techniques. And so the current conditions of Lake Marion's shoreline is that it's dominated by invasive species of plants, which is reed canary grass. You can see here, this is Lisa sampling some insects, and this whole section right here is reed canary grass. So you can just tell it's just kind of taken over the area. And the next thing we noticed was that the banks of Lake Marion, a lot of them are steep and eroding, as you can see, like this. And so that doesn't provide a lot of transitional zone for transitional habitat. And also that the park zone is mowed right up to the edge of the lake, like here. So there's not much of that natural vegetation there either. And so a few recommendations we came up with was to reslope the banks. So you can see here that this is a more gradual slope and it's highly vegetated so that it won't erode into the lake. And it just provides a lot more diverse and habitat for animals. And so the next recommendation is to reduce the mowing areas. Now you don't have to completely get rid of the mowed areas. It's important. It's an important recreational aspect of the Lake Marion Park. But it's to reduce it would really help in a lot of ways. And at first, it creates a natural buffer zone like David talked about earlier. So you can see here, it slows stormwater runoff, and it also collects sediment so that it doesn't get into the lake. And it also reduces goose habitat because one, geese like to feed on newly mowed grass, and two, they need easy access to the water. And so if you're mowing straight up to the edge of the lake, they have easy access into that water. So you can reduce that area of goose habitat and therefore reduce their droppings as well. And it's important to keep in mind that access to the lake shoreline would not be cut off, that there would be plenty of paths to ensure access for fishing and other recreational purposes. And yeah, so another option was manage reed canary grass because it's really just taken over the area, and we give techniques for that in our report. And another step would be improve nearshore plant diversity. And so here are just a couple examples of some restoration, lake restoration in Minnesota. So you can see that they're planting native plants here, and this is just a time series of the degraded shoreline. The slope is very steep, there's not very diverse amount of plants, and then you go to active restoration, and then 3 years later you can see that this is gradually sloping, full of robust vegetation. So you can just see how much more that improves not only just this little shoreline area, but the whole lake itself. And so David and I just threw a lot of information at you. We just kind of wanted to summarize it here and really reiterate that there are a few key actions that you can take that will actually improve many different aspects of Lake Marion. So, for instance, if you choose to reslope the banks, you'll not only reduce seepage, but you'll also improve the fishery by providing more of that shallow habitat, and you'll also improve the biodiversity by allowing those native plants to grow in that area. And another one would be managing carp. It improves the fishery because they're not competing with the fish for that kind of habitat. And it would also decrease the turbidity, so increase clarity of the Lake Marion's water. And it also improved biodiversity once again. And so And as you saw on the last slide, planting that native vegetation on the shoreline would manage stormwater runoff and the phosphorus and nutrients that go along with that, along with improving the biodiversity and managing those geese populations that seem to become a nuisance at points. So you can just see that there's a lot of different things you can do, but there's a few key points that you can take from this that you can really start to improve the lake area. And once again, a whole bigger table will be provided in my report. So, for that, it's back to Joe.
Okay.